Dr. Power, your guests have arrived.
Thanks, Chauncey. Hi, folks. Come on in. There's room for two more over here and one over there. And welcome to week 7. We've got just one more after this. We're on the downhill slide. The time is moving very quickly. I enjoy the class. I laugh a lot in it, and I get just as much out of it, hopefully, as you get from me. It's a wonderful learning experience. This week we carry on with the leadership, the soft side of the house, on how to execute and implement the strategies that we've designed. In fact, I think I mentioned last week we have a new video up in the bonus section by Carolyn Coussin, who's a not-for-profit, started her own organization, did a wonderful paper on strategy, not-for-profit leadership specifically, on how to get her team up and moving. And it's in the bonus section. If you're interested in that sort of materials, or take a copy with you, that's what it's there for. Enjoy it. Feedback on number 2, I sent it back. I was pleased. The papers were good from everybody. I think it's satisfied for me that it validates, if I can, that I think since we started the course, we've raised the awareness, the appreciation for all of us, that the old mental models of the industrial age no longer apply. We have to find those new snapshots of lights out there. And your papers indicate some of those things that are emerging through the fog that we have to reposition, we have to exploit, take advantage of, or mitigate the damage that they're about to do to every industry. I think it's fair to say now all of us can agree that every industry, every sector is going to be disrupted somehow by this Internet of Everything. And our job as strategists is to get out in front and take our organizations and our families out in front of the wave that's already hitting us and having its impact hourly. And in many ways, as we see from the Facebook hearings the other day, is that they're so far out in front, we haven't caught up with the infrastructure, the supports, the safety, the sanctions, the regulations, things that control it. It's like the Wild West out there, and it's going to need for some law and order to be implemented. But as an Aristotelian, I don't want it heavy-handed, overdone, but there's certainly a need for it, because it's in many ways out of control, particularly with respect to the dark side of the Internet that we have discussed and you've discussed in your papers. Yeah, the individual case study, you're well on your way to doing that and submitting them for me on the Sunday night, midnight. And we've gone through some context cases. You've practiced, you've talked to your colleagues, you've got some sense of what I might look at, and I've sent those to you in sort of a very rough way. You're now moving to do this on your own. That doesn't preclude you from talking to your team. I expect you to talk to your teams and review the questions, see what models they're using, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it can't be cut and paste. It's got to be your work. But I expect that your work will look very much like your team's work if you've had these meetings, and that's fine. No needed citation. Take the case as you find it. No extra research required. Just whatever the facts are in the case at the point in time it's written, that's what we'll use for the data. If they've got the data there, fine. If they don't, just make an assumption and push on. All that's required. And with respect to the individual case, anomaly in there on the number of words by an extra 500. Take the lower level, 2,500 is plenty of words, and use appendixes. And again, by now you know, for me it's about the substance rather than the form. An extra few hundred one way or the other doesn't bother me. But I've given you the opportunity that in our class we have some very good strategists who have been doing this. It's old hat. Some could teach the course. And so for you folks, there's a bonus theme out here, and consistent with that bonus side of the house, if you want to do a proper consulting report for me, I'll take the time and mark it and give you the feedback on it, if you want that practice of doing reports. But if you just want to get the job done, the marks are exactly the same, then just put the question 1, don't repeat the question, and go seriatim 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, answer the questions, put the page numbers on, and you're good to go. And make sure you have the cover page and index, executive summary, and the references and appendixes, and those things really don't count. So that's that. What else is on my mind? Exams. Yeah, I'll mark those papers as fast as I can, but with 40 people in the class, I tend to, frankly, work hard to give you good feedback, something that you can take and, frankly, probably want to hang on to for a while. So I'm going to give you good feedback on your individual assignment, but it's going to be at the 11th hour. I get the 40 papers marked and back to you by the time our last few moments together in this class. But that will stand you in good stead for the exam, because you'll have a template there and a sense of how I would answer those questions. And then you're on your own. You've gone completely from startup context cases to doing one on your own in the final exam. 50% of the exam will be doing one on your own with the door closed. The only advantage you'll have is that you'll have the name of the case ahead of time. And again, you're encouraged to talk to your neighbors, as to your friends, as to what models, what tools, what questions. I'll not be giving you the questions ahead of time, just the case. And you do some reading, get some thoughts together, and you shouldn't have any trouble at all in the exam. Keep in mind there'll be two exams. There'll be the regular exam for those people who are set and able to write at the proper time. And the other one is the alternate exam for those people who are for some reason unable to write. And this is arranged with the program office, the exams department. If you can't write the regular one as the time appointed, then there's another exam for you to write, which is different with a different case. So it's important to make sure that if you're in that group, that you make sure what that case is and prepare for that case so there's no mix-up on the morning of writing the exam. I guess that's everything by way of administration. Let me move through some of the things. I was going to talk a bit about see how the time goes. Bloomberg this week, interesting conversation. I thought was worth a few minutes of our time. And it's about the generic drugs and the situation they find themselves in. That right now, that whole industry, the competition is fierce. They're at the top of the curve. And they're experiencing some real hard times economically. Not a good time to buy the stocks. And so the report here is that it's somber. Drug prices are plunging for these folks. Their consolidation, which is normal enough when you get to that point of fierce and marginal growth of 1-2 percentage points, mergers and acquisitions take place, as you've seen, and cutthroat nature of the business. One of the largest suppliers is laying off 14,000 employees because of the economic situation of this industry right now. They say 9 out of 10 drugs prescribed in the U.S. are generic by nature. They're saying that what's changed for them is that if you do the Porter's Five Forces, from the buyers and the suppliers side of the house, both those get very fierce. There's been a consolidation of people who buy the drugs from governments and one thing or another, and they're hitting with a hard fist these individual suppliers to say, if you want to sell to us, bring the price down. And so they're ratcheting down their prices to the point they're threadbare. And in some cases, I'm sure they're going to have to start going and as some talks in here of pruning the rosebush a little bit, do a Porter's Boston matrix to figure which ones are the dogs, the stars, the question marks, and the cash cows. They have to do a portfolio analysis and start deciding what they're going to jettison, throw overboard to bring it down to size so they continue to operate. They're all faced with that right now, and it's all in the supply chain side of the house. They looked at the one company says that they're looking doing the value chain analysis, and what they're doing is going to move their R&D to India away from the U.S., again, because of the value chain analysis and that little block of R&D compared to the other companies. If they get lower cost on R&D by having PhDs in India to do the drug work for them, which there's plenty there to do it, it brings their total cost down, and that flows through to the wringing the pennies out of the value chain nicely for them. So that's an interesting little story in Bloomberg's this week I thought I'd like to share. Other articles too is the millennials, which ties into our first story in the first page today, is that they're saying millennials in the UK, that's 25 to 34-year-olds, they're down now from 50% to about 25% own their own homes. That's quite a drop. In Canada, since the 2016 census, just a couple of years back, we have dropped from 50.2% own their own homes from a 55% a generation earlier. So we've dropped 5 percentage points because of the cost of housing for millennials, which was interesting. It says in Toronto the cost of homes 7.9 times higher than the median household average. And so I think we're all aware of what's going on. They say the home is essentially no prospects of buying one. They've not started to save nor haven't amassed a quarter of what's necessary for down payment. You recall in Canada we've bumped up the requirements for down payments, etc. So it's certainly a new world for those folks compared to what I experienced coming out, buying my first home for as a 25-year-old, married and children, and my wife was a homemaker, and we got it for $16,000. So quite a difference today they're struggling with. Let me tie into that story from the paper today. Ties in nicely. Come back to this one. The story in the paper goes on the price of average homes in Vancouver, and not much different here in Victoria. For a single-family home right now is $917,000. Condominiums are $440,000, and townhouses are $600,000 is the average price. Well, you do the math on that for 20% down payment plus the stress test they want to do. Not too many youngsters at at my age, everybody's a youngster, have that sort of money in their genes. Coupled with that, I see the Canada's folks have $2 trillion in debt. The bank, as the Bank of Canada is thinking about raising the interest rates in Canada. Certainly the states have, and they're talking about 3 more raises, quarter of a point each in the states. and Canada looks like they're going to try to follow suit. And that, of course, puts the brakes on the economy and slows it down a little, makes these folks trying to buy houses that much more difficult for the threshold to get in. Our debt on every province, every municipality, and the federal government will find their servicing for their money they borrow now to service their debt is going to be going up the cost. Last week we shared that historic rates going back in the States, the impact it would have on the People's Liberation Army in China as they pay them. And so we watch that. Keep in mind that countries generally only have, unless they're part of like the European Union and give one of these levers away, we only have two levers to pull on to control our economy. One is the fiscal lever, the other is the monetary policy lever. And the fiscal lever, of course, the finance minister puts the budget out and controls the lever up and down spending and cutting back on spending. And the monetary policy is the interest rates and going down in the basement printing money for the money supply. And those two levers have to be kept in balance to keep you so when you're walking left foot, right foot, and you can't get out of whack with that. And so they're mulling that interest rate, and it's quite a concern to us in business that it's going the right way. NAFTA is pressing hard. They want the deal wrapped up this month, or else not till 2019. They're saying that then presents an uncertain political climate to deal with, and they're pushing for that. And it's a negotiation tactic. We have to decide as Canadians, do you want to be rushed into this? Because there are some concerns, particularly around the car industry and the dairy industry, that we need to be aware of as we go through it. Just a little aside was interesting. French islands of Saint-Pierre-Miquelon, they're just south coast of Newfoundland, and they're talking about now they've got ferries to take Canadians over there for visits to the little island. It's just a small little village. But what's important to the French, of course, it gives them a toehold in North America and a 200-mile limit that we can discuss back and forth for fishing and oil, just in the PEI St. Lawrence, Newfoundland zone in that area there. So, for those that are not aware or forgot about Saint-Pierre-Miquelon, they're still there. Trump's tax is working well for Apple. Apple's bringing back something like $130 billion back into the country, paying little tax on that. And they're going to give an increase to a dividend to all the shareholders. And don't quite give me the number here right now. I think it was 76 cents a share this time around. But the point is, businesses can't have $100 billion sitting in a bank. It's a resource. It's no different than the equipment or the labor, or whatever. The cost of capital is such that if you can't put $100 billion to work, then you have a duty, it seems to me, unless you've got immediate plans for that, to turn it back into dividends or buy back your shares. But you just can't let it sit in the bank drawing the interest rate that banks would pay for it. It has to be put to work. And most chief financial officers do this and do it successfully, going into the money markets and places to safely put until they need the money, or consolidating the funds from all the different subsets of the organization to do that, to get better deal with the government. And so, so they're putting them into use, and that's what Trump had in mind. And in fact, that's California. Amazon was interesting. They picked Vancouver. We'll talk about. No relief in sight for gas. It hits a four-year high. Gasoline is up. In Victoria, we're all paying our gas prices. It's about almost 50% more than what it is in the States. We have a merger acquisition going on, just like we talked earlier about. T-Mobile and Sprint have come together as a merger agreement to reduce the wireless industries. Verizon, AT&T are there. But it shows again that it's this fierce competition, and they're bringing the numbers down. But as they bring a number down, then this idea of monopoly starts, or oligopoly starts, and then probably the prices will tend to go up for us. And so we'll look at that. But they say it's like our banks in Canada. They say there's an optimal size, that banks, if they're too small, can't deal in the global marketplace with global financing and things of that nature. And the same thing is true of these mobile phone system. They want a good size organization, so it warrants them putting in 5G, like we talked about in class, between Ottawa and Toronto, I think it was. And that's going to be necessary for this new industrial age as we drive autonomous cars, that it improves the sensors to have this 5G system in place. Our Prime Minister is welcomed the Amazon expansion. As I said, it's going into Vancouver. Big dollars going in there. McGregor Roberts, our mayor over there, says it's going to bump 100,000 jobs now in Vancouver. Amazon's going to put 7,000 people now to work in this new workforce they're expecting to go in there. And you put a sidebar in there talking again about the Trans-Canada Pipeline. That fight goes on and courts are still involved in it. We're going to talk about a number of things of taxes this year. We talked a bit about that on the site this week. We talked in terms of Tax Freedom Day, 9th, 10th of June. But incrementally, hourly, at the federal, provincial, municipal levels, incrementally, those directing minds are finding innovative ways to add to that date. And so the date's going to keep getting pushed. When it gets September, is my point. Is that the tipping point? At what point does it stop? But in any event, now this is the Airbnb. They want to people with vacant homes or homes they rent out to pay a tax. They also want a digital tax on things like Netflix when you use your computer. In fact, it was our post office, decade and a half, 2 decades ago, when we first started doing emails. They seriously lobbied the federal government that there should be a tax in every email because it was post office business. So even though we'd do it in emails, they still wanted a fraction of a penny for every email you sent. Fortunately, the powers to be at that time didn't put it through. But here's the same thing here. They're saying we need to find extra tax revenues to pay this debt and deficit and rising interest rates. So where can we look? And so they're going to look at Netflix and other things to see if we can recover some funds from that. Walmart is getting out. Amazon toted Walmart's in the food industry, and they're having their cake eaten over there by the British Sainsbury's, a company of a $10 billion organization. They're eating Walmart's cake when it comes to retail sales and one thing or another on food supplies, etc. So Walmart is quitting the UK and starting to back down a little bit, and it's also as repositioning as they seize the impact of online shopping. They're going to start reducing the size of Walmart stores down to something far smaller as they do this and shift the emphasis more to online shopping for Walmart. And that would kind of make sense. But it shows us again when they do a Porter's Five Forces, the reposition takes place. Another tax in this province. Our government decided it would be a good idea if we stopped the MSP premiums that we all pay, depending on how much you make, how much you pay, and whether you're family or single. But it ran for a single person about $80 extra a month, and married about 140, 150, 140 some odd a month to. And the government said, what we'll do is we want to cut that out. Individuals won't have to pay that anymore. And the solution is, of course, they want to put on property tax for the people in the area. So our taxes, if you own a home, you're going to pay an extra 2% property tax to go towards MSP. So they just shifted it to the municipalities, who in turn will shift it down to us folks. So it's cascading down. School dress codes, you might want to talk about that. There's argument going on today about school dress codes for our children. Changes needed to the medical pot plan. And the same thing here is what they want to do is get more control over medical pot, maybe limit now the number of sites. We've had a bit of a discussion with that today, at least in this province. But what's interesting in it is that they're saying that they're now going to make it that or encourage companies that have, like Great West Life has done it already. They'll put that in the medical in your medical coverage, that if you get a proper medical prescription for these drugs, then they're going to be covered under your company medical plan. And of course, as strategists, that goes to your premiums and things we should be looking at. Meat products, look for pins. There's been some instance around here of people putting pins in sausages and things. About 3 times it's come up. The real estate group, lobbyists again, are advocating this idea of homes, that we should not have medical marijuana growing. We're allowed to have 4 plants in our house if you got the prescription to grow them each year. And but they're saying these ideas are doing impact to the properties, and they're concerned that it's impacting the real estate section as a whole. Federal government hasn't seemed to buy into the idea yet, but something to watch. But the Justice Minister for the federal government said that federal rules around marijuana will take precedent over provincial law. She said if the provincial prohibitions are challenged in court, the federal law will prevail. So if we watch the feds on this and take our guidance from them, it seems. Another Internet of Everything device this week, it's called the MrBox, designed by University of Toronto designers for measles and rubella. And on-the-spot assessment, do it instantly, budget priced. You get your readings back within 35 minutes. And again, you ask the question, what happens to clinics? New Zealand Warship's going to get a service upgrade here, $300 million by our graving yard, which is a good thing for the Victoria, but we're swamped. we're down just about 4% unemployment in the province right now, certainly in Victoria. Vacancy rates for properties are close to nil, like 0.4%. Properties for sale, they're hard to find properties for sale. It's a very tight situation, and the economy tends to flourish nicely here. Article here about workplace substance use policies for Canadian employers. They're suggesting that your company start thinking about putting these policies in place. The EU deal, we talked about patents and drugs a few minutes ago. They're negotiating with the EU right now. It's close to $500,000 a year, and what they want to do is add to the TRIP, it's called, on patents. They want to extend it from 20 years by an extra 2 years to 22 years, and the cost of that extension is able to cost Canadians something in the order of up to $500 million, an extra cost rather for the generic folks get involved. NAFTA rules, new prices on cars, another tax situation again. That these new NAFTA rules going in, if the tariffs come into play, it's going to be at 2.5% for a lighter vehicle and 6.1% for Canada as an additional cost. And they say we'll pay between $470 US to $2,200 US extra for these vehicles if this comes to pass. So the cost of automobiles will be going up. Interesting story here. Fairfax Toys went into receivership, and the Canadian thing was making money, about $100 million in earnings a year before interest. And so a company stepped in, Fairfax, to buy it. They're looking at it, and they say that with that $100 million plus the real estate that they pick up in Canada is worth about $300 million, and they're offering $300 million. So they like it, but they're going to change its strategy. They're going to change the formats for the school, or for the stores, is what they're saying, inviting families and kids to move away from the big box. Same thing we just heard about Walmart, back to the small stores. So again, it's that experience, and they're going to come down more boutique. This was troubling to me that the Foxconn plant in Wisconsin on the Lake Michigan are going to start pumping water out there. They're going to take roughly 27 million liters of water every day out of the lake to service this plant going in on the state side. And wow, at some point those Great Lakes, I mean, they're a national treasure, and it won't take much to drain them if we keep this up. So we have to be on guard for the fresh water in Canada and the rules and regulations, but here they've just got the approval to go ahead and start draining that amount each day out of the site. WestJet ready to walk if Air Canada is ready if WestJet's pilots decide to walk. So they're getting the unions in WestJet are getting ready to go on strike, possibly. And of course, as we've seen in our course, that's the time to attack. When there's a merger, acquisition, or some turbulence within your competitor, Air Canada now will do everything it can to take market share and win over those people who fly Air Canada and see if they can't bring a percentage point or two back to their side of the ledger. So both sides will be working hard on this. Southwest bookings fall after the failed flight. Iran shows that records show Iran lied about nukes, according to Israel. I'm not sure all the facts are in on that yet. We could watch for it, but it's important to us what happens there in the Middle East and these 7 countries America's gone into since 9/11, and Iran sits there. And Iran, as I said, we've got MBA students, graduates of this university over there that from our partnering with the university over there, and fine people. The group that I've met are fine people. I'm not talking about the ruling class or those folks. I'm talking just the person who took the courses and the profs I talked to. They're just want to get on with life. There's about 70 some odd million people, much like you and I, middle class, intelligent, very modern country like Canada. And so I'm troubled. I'm concerned about it as we watch with interest. But we challenge every hypothesis, and to include this pile of materials they have. Pipelines go to court. In Brazil, some surfer went 78 feet 70 feet high on a wave. Was the record, surfing at 70 feet, 4 stories off the ground. Now the feds are going to get involved in business. Again, this is law, but it also more for your bottom line. Each one of you out there, if you're involved with 600 companies on the Toronto Stock Exchange, you're getting a directive from the federal government here that they want you now to start looking. In fact, it's 270,000 companies that are on the exchange, including 600 which are on the Toronto Stock Exchange. they are putting the message out. They want more diversity. We want you to disclose the number of women working, the number of equity-seeking groups, the number of visible minorities, number on the boards, and number in your senior management. And there's going to be some sort of reporting, one thing or another, going as part of the corporate governance. So watch for that, but certainly the culture is being changed from the top down. The Feds did it first with their over 50% of their cabinet is female, and they want to roll that and keep on coming down. So interesting times we have to look at. Robots solve problems. This one is called Sophia the robot. She was involved with a fashion show, etc., in Ontario, and did remarkably well. The audience enjoyed her very much. She answered all the questions, and quite stimulating. Now, Yahoo parent removes a clause specific to Canada after pressure. Canadian users were asked to share their data on their friends and contacts and phone numbers with the U.S.-based multinational group. So it wasn't just in Canada. You had to share that out there. And the Office of the Privy Commissioner confirmed Tuesday that Yahoo, Tumblr, AOL, Huffington Post, etc., all must have a complaint clause in there that provides that this stuff will not be shared unless you authorize them to share this information. So that's that. What else did I have on chat about? Oh, third country agreement, Ralph Goodall. This is interesting. Again, part of the exploratory talks about our immigration, about our borders and border securities. And so we're saying that third-party agreement that between the States and Canada, looks like we're going to agree that any asylum seekers coming up here, no matter what, we have an agreement to reject them and have put back in the States. And the States have the ability to reject anybody coming from Canada and put them back into Canada without any other regard. We'll just return them. And so that's in the mill. And I guess the final thing we'll talk about, again, and get back to this wonderful little book called Foreign Affairs. And they have student rates, by the way, and take advantage that you're a student right now. You can get this, it's a giveaway price. But this article caught my eye again about President Xi in China and the emergence. We talked about China in the Middle Kingdom and after the period of humiliation and how since 1978 with the fall of the Bamboo Curtain and moving forward, Canada's reemerged, or not Canada, but China's reemerging as the Middle Kingdom with that sort of power. And it is really doing things smart, and it's something we have to watch because they're doing such a marvelous job of this thing. But there's certainly President Xi is leading the way as he does it. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just a couple of points that caught my eye. Like, here's an interesting, just one of many sort of innovative things he's doing over there. The government also developed a massive biometric database thanks to the state-of-the-art voice facial recognition technology that could be married to its vast telephone and video surveillance network used to identify and retaliate against party critics. In 2020, they plan to roll out this national system of social credit, integrating information into an online payment and social media apps into a database that would allow it to punish or reward citizens based on their supposed trustworthiness. If your behavior falls short, defaulting on a loan, participating in a process, or even wasting too much time playing video games, you'll face the consequences. Government might slow down your internet connections or restrict your access to everything from restaurants to travel jobs and preference for jobs for those who abide. Ambitious, broad, President Xi has put a wall of regulations up designed to control the flow of ideas and culture and even capital between China and the rest of the world. Certainly, as he's moved away from the Chinese, like this, what they call the tall poppy syndrome, that you don't want to be standing up above the rest, you get lopped off. But Xi is standing up for the first time above the rest. The rest always try to be one of the crowd. But he's taken control of everything, and he is the tall poppy, very much like our friend President Trump. He stands up there and does it. Certainly Hu Jintao was the president before that, was very just one of the team as we do it. In any event, an example of his gambit is the Belt and Road Initiative. We talked in this class, launched in 2013. It now encompasses 900 projects. More than 80% of them are contracted to Chinese firms who are building these projects in partnerships with those nations across the way. And the effort goes beyond mere infrastructure. In Pakistan, for example, the plan includes not only railways, highways, and dams, but they're going to develop a system of video and internet surveillance, similar to that in Beijing, and a partnership with the folks. The Belt and Road, another initiative, is to advances military objectives. The state-owned enterprises now run 76 ports and terminals out of 34 countries. Out of 34 countries, they have those ports: Greece, Palestine, Sri Lanka. They've invested in these ports, and then high-profile visits from Chinese Navy ships come in there, tie up, and get reserviced. Beijing has announced that it would establish special arbitration courts and to hear complaints, but it would promote alternative legal underpinning by Chinese rules. So they're going to put these arbitration courts will be bound by Chinese legal systems to determine in those 34 different countries conflicts they have. Hey, there's a lot going on there in China. We should watch President Xi as he plays Go rather than chess on the world stage. Anyway, folks, I hope that's enough for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to talking to you next week. Bye-bye.